Hey, welcome back to I'm Just Gonna Say It, episode 32. Today will be another edition of Spirit Seekers about the 7 Hermetic Principles from Hermetic philosophy, and specifically the book The Kybalion. Let's get right to it. Here we go with number 32. So today we will be diving into Hermeticism and the 7 Hermetic Principles, as found in the book The Kybalion, written by the 3 initiates. Now, who this pseudonym represents is a separate discussion and not really important for now. Now, the Hermetic Corpus, as it is called, refers to the volumes of work on this subject, and it consists of a whole lot of books, but the Kybalion forms a good place to start, in my opinion. Now, the name Hermeticism comes from a figure called Hermes Trismegistus, or Hermes the Thrice Great. A person who, according to legend, lived before Christ, who was a wise pagan, leaving marks throughout his life. Now, of course, it also refers to the Greek god Hermes, who was the messenger of the gods, and partially because of that, Trismegistus is also often associated with the Egyptian scribe of the gods, thew. Thew Hermes is often used to refer to Trismegistus as well, implying Hermes Trismegistus was a reincarnation of sorts of thew. Now, Hermeticism was most popular in the 1600s and during the Renaissance era, and is closely linked to Western occultism. So the origins in time of the Hermetic Corpus is probably somewhere in that time period, not before Christ. But if you consider him a reincarnation of thew, he would predate Christ in that manner, I guess. The term hermetically closed or hermetically sealed is derived from the word Hermeticism as well. Hermes Trismegistus, according to legend, invented the process of making a glass tube airtight, a process used in alchemy, using a secret seal. So back to the Kybalion. First published in 1908, the book has been in the public domain since 1977. Hence a link will be provided in the description to the complete book in PDF. I definitely advise everybody with an interest in spirituality and in the nature of reality, or in law of attraction for that matter, to read this book. It came into my life at the perfect time, and that is something you hear many of its readers say. As it states, the lips of wisdom are closed except to the ears of understanding. As such, it is one of those books that you can keep reading, and every time you do, you will discover new insights in there, and it will keep providing you with new insights. Kind of like, and this is probably no coincidence, the Emerald Tablets of thew. More on those in another episode, by the way. Now, the Kybalion, for me, kind of put into words the way I already saw the world when it first came to my ears. I say ears because I love listening to audiobooks while I'm busy doing chores or cleaning or whatever, like that. So when I first heard the Kybalion through YouTube, being on autoplay, it was a strange experience, as if I was hearing someone else putting my thoughts into words. Fast forward to like 4 years later, and here we are. By now I have read a whole lot of the Hermetic Corpus, and I've gathered quite some knowledge about the Golden Dawn system of ceremonial magic as well. I'm referring to the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, an occult society still in operation today, known for having Aleister Crowley as a member, among others, until he was kicked out. But enough history, let's dive into the 7 principles, the main focus of the Kybalion. I'll first mention them. They are principle of mentalism, the principle of correspondence, the principle of vibration, the principle of polarity, the principle of rhythm, and the principle of cause and effect, and finally the principle of gender. Now we're just gonna go by them one by one, starting with the principle of mentalism. But before we do, I want to ask you if you like this video to click like and also subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Sharing it will also be much appreciated. Now back to our list. The principle of mentalism. This principle states that the universe is mental in nature. All is mind, or a thought in the mind of the all. Everything that happens on this physical plane has to be a result of a mental state that precedes it. After all, nothing exists without a thought first giving birth to the concept. The book states, your thoughts are seeds. Plant positive seeds in your mind garden. Now, the parallel between this principle and law of attraction needs no explanation. I talk more about this in episode 29. Now, both in the literal and the more metaphysical sense, everything is preceded by a thought, at least within the human domain. But nature too can be seen as the result of a thought in the mind of the all. The all is something the Kybalion talks about at length as well, stressing that the all really lives up to its name in a way. After all, if it didn't, it wouldn't be the all. The Kybalion also states the all is in all, but all are not equal to the all. Just like the all is in the earthworm, but the earthworm is not equal to the all. This is also mentioned as a warning, I think, against mistaking yourself for the all or God, as a result of realizing the unity of everything, which comes with overcoming the ego. All is one can quickly turn into I am one, so I am all. A warning that is best heeded. Now on to number 2. The principle of correspondence. The principle of correspondence expresses the idea that there is always a correspondence between the laws and phenomena of the various planes of being in life. And states, as above, so below, as below, so above, as within, so without, to perpetuate the miracle of one. Now, this principle states that there is a harmony which exists between these planes. Now, the planes they are talking about are the great physical plane, the great mental plane, and the great spiritual plane. Here we again find the idea, just as in law of attraction, that the mental plane stands at the birth of what happens in the physical plane, and vice versa, creating a feedback loop, if you will, of thought and experience. Now, the same relation exists between the mental and the spiritual plane, with a feedback loop between thought and inspiration. So the spiritual plane can be seen as your higher self for now, or your soul. Aside from between planes of existence, the principle also expresses itself within them. Take for instance the structure of the human brain and the nervous system, and compare it to the clusters of galaxies in our universe. They look almost identical. And this is a perfect example of this principle. Another example is the spiral, as defined by the golden ratio, a shape and motion that can be found on all levels of the physical plane, from a seashell to a galaxy. And although most of us have little experience in the other two planes, at least not that we remember, it is through this principle, the principle of correspondence, that we can safely conclude that the spiral will be similarly ubiquitous in those planes of existence. In this manner, you can use the principle to attempt to make assumptions and understand things without having to experience them directly, either because you haven't or because you are unable to through the shortcomings of your senses. Now, it is said about this principle that one cannot understand this principle by logic, but that only through observing it in action it can be known and one can attempt to understand it. On to number 3. Principle of vibration. Now, this principle states that motion is manifest in everything in the universe, that nothing rests and everything moves and vibrates. Through physics and the like, that this principle holds very true. Any distinctions we can observe between the different manifestations of matter, if you will, or energy is a better way of putting it, and even spirit, are all the result of a difference in rate of vibration, frequency, in other words. If you go to a small enough level, quantum, everything eventually is made of the same thing, or the same energy. Only the rate of vibration of this energy decides whether it manifests as oxygen or marble, for example. As you develop yourself and grow spiritually, your frequency becomes higher as well. The all represents the highest rate of vibration, almost to the point of being at rest. One of the skills a Hermetic strives to make his own is mental transmutation. The transmuting by thought of one vibration into another. To change your mental state is to change your vibration. So if you wish to transmute a state of sadness to a state of happiness, for instance, the trick is to fix your attention on the more desirable state. Fake it till you make it, in a manner of speaking. An example from psychology is the feedback mechanism that is life. Not only does happiness make you smile, by smiling you also produce happiness.
In a famous study on this, they make people look at video with
the pencil either between their teeth or their lips, forcing either a smile or a pouty lip. Afterwards, participants were asked to rate their mood, and indeed, those with the pencil between their teeth reported feeling better. A link to this study is provided in the description. In the same way, it applies to the law of attraction. Like attracts like. A high frequency only creates resonance with other high frequencies. Study the principles of vibration in physics as well and understand resonance. Through the principle of correspondence, this will teach you a lot about the power of this principle as well. What you are basically doing when transmuting is changing the polarity of a mental state. After all, happiness and sadness are both extremes, or different poles, if you will, of the same thing, our affect. That's why it's possible to change one into the other by switching its polarity. This, of course, is a vital skill when manifesting things as well, as it enables you to regulate your emotions, one of the biggest driving forces behind the law of attraction. This switching of polarities brings us to the next principle, number 4. The principle of polarity. This principle is all about duality, the dual nature of our world. All manifested things have two sides or two poles. Everything has its opposite, and it is through having this opposite that existence is possible at all. As everything is relative, we can only experience anything through the nature of duality. Without hot there is no cold, without happy there is no sad, and likewise without good there is no evil, and so on and so forth. Without an opposite polarity or pole to compare with, a pole cannot exist. Therefore, polarity or duality is a prerequisite for being able to experience anything. But in the end, two different polarities are the same thing. Hot and cold are both temperature after all, and happy and sad are both affect. They merely differ in degree. The truth, one could say, is in the center of it all, the center of all those opposites. Because from this principle we can also conclude that all opposites can be reconciled. Hot can be cold to something even hotter, for example. All truths are thus but half-truths. This can be clearly seen if one attains depolarization, or being in the middle between polarities. From this position you start observing how most people are polarized to one pole or the other, enabling them to only see half of the truth. Only through becoming depolarized can one start to see and understand all truth, to the extent that that is possible here at all, which is that all opposites can be reconciled, or are reconciled, as they are the same thing. Opposites are identical in nature, yet different in degree. Depolarization can be attained through being mindful of your thoughts and modulating them. And there's also the root of ceremonial magic, in this case through the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, combined with the middle pillar ritual, borrowed in part from Kabbalah, which focus on consciously modulating and moving around your life force, or ki as they would say in Asia, to attain this. This would take a separate video to explain in depth, so if you're interested in this, let me know in the comments and I'll make that too. On to number 5. The principle of rhythm. The principle of rhythm tells us that in everything and in every pair of opposites there is manifested a pendulum-like motion, a to and from, a flow and inflow, so to speak, to and from the two polarities of a thing. In nature this is most easily observed. Just think about the changing seasons or the changing tides. This principle also states that the measure of movement in one direction is equal to the measure of movement in the other direction. A depolarized person tries to avoid swinging to one side too much in the first place, thus avoiding the return swing of the pendulum, as it were. One can also use this principle, being aware of how it functions, to attain certain desired states. The Kybalion states that the laws of the universe cannot be broken, but can be used against one another and themselves. On to principle number 6. The principle of cause and effect. This principle states that there is a cause for every effect and an effect for every cause. Chance does not exist in the universe. Randomness or chance merely represent a law we do not yet understand or perceive. Nothing escapes the principle of cause and effect, not even human behavior. I mentioned this in the previous video too on the money-free economy. Human behavior cannot be seen separate from its surroundings and thus has many causes and effects, the majority of which, by the way, are outside of our control, kind of eliminating the concept of free will. More on that in the next edition of Utopolis 1, but I will also add it to the Spirit Seekers playlist because they're kind of overlapped. After that side note, we have arrived now at the last principle, number 7. The principle of gender. This principle states that gender is manifest in all things. This does not refer to gender as seen from the point of sex, but rather creation, procreation and generation in general, and manifest on all planes of existence, as the masculine and feminine principles. The Kybalion speaks of mental gender, not referring to someone's gender in the sexual sense, whether this is in congruence with their actual gender or not, but reasons from the point of view that both genders are manifest in all things, and that we should strive to have a balanced mental gender in that manner. Our concept of sexual gender is but one expression amongst an infinite amount of expressions of these two principles. The feminine principle is usually described as a state of receiving impressions, of imagination and the generation of ideas. It moves in all directions as an explorer, so to speak. It has a much more varied field of operation than the masculine principle, which is always of a more giving out or expressing nature. It puts things out there, so to say, and it moves or pushes forward, and is often equated to will or willpower. Now, I bet you can see the sort of opposing nature of these qualities. They are two polarities of the same thing, gender, after all. So here too it is imperative that these forces are balanced with each other and that you remain in the middle. To be clear, this does not mean that everybody should become bisexual or something, although one could argue this would make for a more balanced state of being among the world. But that's a whole nother discussion and not one I intend to dive into right now. But I digress, as I often do. So as you become familiarized with these principles, you will start observing them in action, both inside and around you. This is a first step towards learning to use the principles to your advantage, instead of being at their mercy, so to speak. The parallel with law of attraction there is quite obvious again. Either you are at the mercy of subconscious manifestation and attraction, or you learn to do it consciously. So that you can use it to your advantage once again. As such, I see law of attraction as one of the many inferences one can make based on the 7 principles we just discussed. So if this way of looking at the universe resonated with you, and your next task on your to-do list is reading the Kybalion, I'm afraid. As said earlier, the full PDF version can be found in the description, as well as one to an audiobook version for those listeners amongst you. And on that note, I'm going to end this episode. If you have any questions, please post them in the comments and I will definitely get back to you. And in the next episode, another evidence for extraterrestrials, focusing this time on mysteries surrounding Mars. And some other stuff, but you will see that in the next episode. The episode after that will be another edition of Utopolis 1. Once again, please like, share and subscribe. And until the next episode, love y'all, arrivederci.
It's time to stop! It's time to stop, okay? No more! Where the fuck are your parents? Who are your parents? I'm gonna call Child Protective Services. It's time to stop!